Hello world! Welcome Hearthstone fans. My name is Funky Monkey and we have an exciting video for you guys today. So it was announced earlier this week that we have a new expansion coming up in Hearthstone called Rise of Shadows, where it features 5 villains, which are Hagatha, Dr. Boom, King Tog Waggle, Madame Lazul the Fortune Teller, and none other than the Supreme Archaeologist himself, Rafam. And together they formed the League of Evil, and they plan on doing something mischievous with Dalaran. I don't know if they're going to be stealing stuff within the city, or maybe even stealing the city itself. Who knows? It is undisclosed to us yet, but what we do know is that they just released 9 brand new cards that are going to be released with the new expansion. So, we are going to be going over them with a card review in depth. We're going to be looking at the pros, the cons of each card, as well as the uses of each of those cards as well too. And I will also be rating them on a system from 1 to 5 stars, 5 being you will see them in every single deck, 1 being you will never see them in any decks. So without further ado, let's hop into it. Alright, the first card we have for us today is the man himself, Rafam, Archthief Rafam. It is a 7 mana cost, 7/8 creature with Taunt. He also has a battle cry where it turns all cards in your hand and deck into legendary minions. So very similar to the effect of the Golden Monkey, which we saw in the League of Explorers, but without the huge drawback of having to go all through all these loops and hurdles to get the card in our hand. Now, some pros of this card are when you always have an expensive creature like this, you want it to have Taunt. If it doesn't directly impact the board right away, having Taunt is nice because it does go ahead and stall while the effect plays out. It is also a 7 mana cost, 7/8 creature, so its stat line is pretty good already. Another thing that this thing does as well is it turns all of your bad top decks later on in the game into actually good top decks. So as the game goes on, you don't really want to be drawing those 1, 2, 3 mana cost minions. They're just kind of plugging up your hand. They don't really impact the game too much in the later parts of the game. So what this does, it allows you to turn all those really bad top decks into potentially good ones. Now, a couple cons of this card. It is very RNG based, so you could end up with a ton of really bad legendaries that you really can't use. You could end up with a Millhouse Mana Storm, you could end up with like a Lorewalker Cho. Now, as far as the uses for this card, I think it'll shine best in mid-range decks. In aggro decks, 7 mana cost is pretty expensive. Sure, it does kind of refill your end game a little bit, instead of drawing those 1 and 2, 3 mana cost top decks, you can go ahead and top deck some other things. However, with Zoo, you typically want to kill your opponent as quickly as possible. So if it does get to turn 7, well, chances are you probably lost anyways, and the deck didn't do what it was supposed to do. And in control, kind of like what I mentioned before, you just lose a lot of those control tools that you really need to be a control deck. So I think this will shine in mid-range. Being a 7 mana cost card is not too unreasonable, and it might just give the deck a little bit more oomph to push through some of those other control matchups. So overall, I'm going to rate this card 2 stars. Now the next card that we have up for you guys today is Forbidden Words. So this effect is very reminiscent of another effect that we've seen in Whispers of the Old Gods with Forbidden Healing, Forbidden Flame, Forbidden Shaping. So they are bringing it back. What this is it's a 0 mana cost card where you spend all your mana and then you get to kill a creature with that much attack or less. So yes, that is right. Priest finally has a way to deal with those 4 attack minions. Now, some pros of this card. It is very versatile. You can use it in the early game to go ahead and destroy a early attack creature. And you can also use it in the later game as well to destroy those really tough minions to deal with. If you aren't running Shadow Word Death, or if you don't draw it, this is another way to deal with those really big creatures. One thing to note here is that because it can kill those 4 attack creatures, we finally have a way to deal with the dragons. So we can deal with Twilight Drake, we can deal with Malygos, Kalecgos, Ysera, and other dragons of that nature. Some cons of this card are, as the game goes on, this card becomes a little bit more mana inefficient. If you look at the comparative cards, Shadow Word Pain and Shadow Word Death, they do a lot better job at killing those creatures for the mana cost. So, to kill like a mountain giant, instead of spending 8 mana with Forbidden Words to kill it, you can just kill it with a Shadow Word Death, and then you can also play something else on your turn to go ahead and swing the tempo into your favor. Whereas this one, if your opponent has other creatures on the board and you have to use your entire turn to kill a big creature, chances are you're not any better than where you were before. As far as some uses to this, I think we are going to be seeing this quite a bit. Priest is losing a lot of their control removal spells, so they are losing Psychic Scream, Shadow Reaper Anduin, Duskbreaker, so they're losing a lot of their AoE removals, and unless we get another one, the only thing that they have to rely on right now is Mass Hysteria. We might have to rely a little bit more on spot removal, on single target removal, such as Shadow Word Pain, Shadow Word Death, and then Forbidden Words. I think this will at least see a one of in most Priest decks, just because it is so versatile, and we are getting another Dragon in the set, which is 4 attack, so this can go ahead and deal with that quite nicely. So overall, because of its versatility, I am going to give it 3 stars. So Rogue is getting a new card called Evil Miscreant. It is a 3 mana cost, 1/5 creature with a combo effect where you get 2 lackeys into your hand. And these lackeys can range from all sorts of different kinds. They are all 1 mana cost, 1/1 minions, and they all have some kind of a battle cry effect. So some of them can do 2 damage, some of them can evolve a minion that you have into a 1 mana cost more minion, and so forth. So they don't have huge effects, but they do have some pretty good effects for a 1 mana cost minion. Now some pros of this card are that it generates a ton of value, So for 3 mana, not only do you get a decent stat body, 3 mana cost 1/5, but you also get 2 cards back into your hand, so you can go ahead and use those cards at a different time. Rogue also loves combo and battle cry effects. So the lackeys that you get from the combo from Evil Miscreant can go ahead and be used at a later time to go ahead and trigger another combo effect because they are so cheap. Now some cons to this card is that it is kind of a worse stat line for the body as more of like a tempo play if you compare it to cards like Hench Clan Thug, SI7 Agent, Blink Fox, Edwin Van Cleef. It is a little bit worse compared to those cards. As far as the uses for this card, I believe that this will best fit into some kind of a combo tempo deck. So we've already seen a deck kind of similar to this already using Spirit of the Shark and Fungomancer and Strider and such, where they really utilize those battle cry and those combo effects with Spirit of the Shark, and this just ties in perfectly. So because this card is a little bit more reliant on those other cards that utilize those combo and battle cry effects, I don't think you can put it into every single deck. However, in those decks that it can fit into, like with Spirit of the Shark, I think it'll perform pretty decently. So overall, I will rate this card 2 stars. The next card we have up is another rogue card called Tog Waggles Scheme. What this does is it's a 1 mana cost spell where it shuffles a minion into your deck depending on how long you have it in your hand. So the scheme effect is whenever you draw it, every single turn after that you hold it in your hand, it gets upgraded by 1. Now some pros of this card, you can shuffle any minion into your deck, not just your own. So if your opponent has a really big creature that you want yourself, that's right, you can shuffle, 10, 15, 20 copies into your deck yourself. This card is also great to pair with Myra's Unstable Element. So Myra's clears out your entire deck, and then instead of taking Fatigue, you can just use Tog Waggles Scheme to go ahead and refill your deck, so that way you don't have to worry about Fatigue anymore. It is also a very cheap mana cost card, so you can use it on basically whatever turn you want to. You can combo it with a lot of things, and overall, just very easy to use whenever you want to use it. So a con to this one is that the turn that you draw it does have very low impact, low value. So it is a card that you do want to go ahead and draw early, and then you get a lot of value out of it later. But because of this, it is going to be somewhat of a dead card in your hand for quite some time until you actually see a minion that you want to go ahead and shuffle into your deck. In conclusion, some of the uses that you can have with this card is in Pogo Hopper, obviously, where you can go ahead and shuffle just a million Pogo Hoppers into your deck so they can get huge. One other combo that you can use with this card is Augmented Elec. It is going to be a standard card after rotation still. So for 4 mana, you can put down Augmented Elec and then use Tog Waggles Scheme to get a lot of cards back into your deck. We might even see somewhat of a control or fatigue matchup, depending on how many control tools that Rogue gets in this next expansion. it is going to be very hard to fatigue a rogue when they keep shuffling things into their deck. And because of all the shuffle mechanics, I think it might even see potential uses in like a academic espionage rogue as well. So because this card isn't necessarily great in a straight up tempo deck, and it kind of needs a specific theme to have to build around it, it does have a very great effect for what it does. So I'm going to go ahead and rate it 3 stars. So the next card that we have is the first neutral that we've seen, called Spellword Jeweler. It is a 3 mana cost, 3/4 creature, where it makes yourself immune to spells that directly target you until your next turn. Now, some pros to this one is obviously it can go ahead and save you against those combo OTK decks that do directly target you, but it is only 1 turn. And another pro is that it has a decent stat line for its mana. Now, some cons of this card are, well, a lot of combo OTK decks out there don't directly target you. So if you look at Mind Blast Priest, that doesn't directly target you, so it can bypass this card. Also, if you look at Sinister Strike with a Malagos Rogue, that doesn't need to target you either. So some of the combo OTK decks out there can still bypass this card. But in conclusion, this is a very niche card. I'm glad that we are seeing some more tech cards out there, especially since we have a lot that are rotating. You know, like Nerubian Unraveler and Mindbreaker and such, Skulking Geist. But I think this card isn't going to see too much play unless we see a really strong combo OTK deck in the meta that directly targets you. So I think this card is more so printed as a contingency plan, kind of like EMP Operative. You know, if the mechs got out of control, then that would have kind of solved that. So if there is a combo OTK deck out there that does kind of gets out of control, I think this will help keep it in check. But unless that happens, I don't think we'll see it. So because of that, I'm going to rate it 1 star. The other neutral card that we have released to us is Chef Nomi. It is a legendary. So this guy really likes to burn things. He is a terrible cook. He's a 7 mana cost, 6/6 creature. If you have no cards in your deck, then you get to fill up your board with 6/6 elementals. So some pros of this one is it is a fantastic late game finisher. Oftentimes, if you play it on the later part of the game, where both of you are kind of going to that fatigue, your opponent most likely is out of the removal spells, so it's very hard for them to deal with an entire board of 6/6 creatures. Now, an obvious con to this one is that you do have to empty out your deck. So until that happens, it is going to be kind of a dead card in your hand. You could play it beforehand, but it's very bad stats for its mana. You know, 7 mana cost 6/6 is very underwhelming. In a pinch, you could play it, but until you really want to play it for its value, it's going to be mostly a dead card in your hand. So in conclusion, some of the uses for this would be in maybe like a control fatigue type of a deck. You know, if we still see, you know, control priests or warlocks or warriors, it'll just be that nice late game finisher for them. We also might see it in more of a trickier deck with Rogue, because Myra's Unstable Element can pair very well with this. You empty out your deck with Myra's Unstable Element, then you can play this guy, Chef Nomi, and then you can go ahead and refill your deck with Academic Espionage or Tog Waggles Scheme. So because this card is very specific and kind of hard to pull off in a lot of matchups, I'm going to go ahead and give this guy a 1 star. So we have 3 more cards lined up for you guys. And they are my favorite, so I saved them to the end. The next one up is going to be Hagatha's Scheme. So we've already seen Tog Waggles Scheme. This one is for Hagatha. So when you draw it, the longer it stays in your hand, the more damage it can do, and it does damage to all minions on the board. Now, some pros of this one is if you draw it early, it can potentially do a lot of damage. If you have this in your mulligan hand, or if you draw it on turn 1, by the time that you play it on turn 5, it's already going to be doing 4 to 5 damage to all minions on the board. Another pro to this one is that after rotation, this is going to be Shaman's only big removal spell, minus Lightning Storm. So we have Volcano, which is going to be rotating out. So this kind of helps fill that gap. Now, some cons to this one is that if you do draw it later in the game, it loses a lot of value. Now, some uses for this one. I think there is going to be quite a few decks that play this card just because we are losing Volcano. So kind of like what I said before, it is going to be filling that void that is left by Volcano. Also too, we are going to be losing a lot of elementals post-rotation as well. So I don't think Elemental Shaman will be as much of a thing. So we might actually be heading more towards the Control Shaman route. And this is going to be very important in that kind of a deck. Now there are some ways that we can guarantee this into our hand early too, because the longer that it stays in your hand, the better value it gets. Well, we can draw it pretty early with Spirit of the Frog, combined with any 4 mana cost spell like Hex, or we could even use Storm Chaser to get it into our hand as well, because we are going to be losing those higher spelled cards in Shaman, like the Spellstone or Volcano. So right now, we only really have this card, Hagatha Scheme, and Reign of Toads. So we have a pretty good chance of drawing this into our hand early if we use Storm Chaser. So because this card is so strong if you draw it early on, when you really want to use it against those aggro and mid-range decks to go ahead and stall, I think this card will have plenty of uses, especially because it will be replacing Volcano. So this will be the go-to control card for Shaman, and because I believe that a lot of the mid-range decks for Shaman are going to be rotating out with those elementals, I believe we will be seeing a lot more of the control Shaman, so I'm going to be rating this 5 stars. Now the next card we have in store is a Druid card called the Forest Aide. Now this one has a new keyword called Twin Spell. And what this does is after you cast it once, you get a copy of it back into your hand to use at a later time. Very similar to like Extra Arms with Priest. So you cast it once and then you get another similar copy back to your hand, so you can use it whenever you want after that. And what this does is it summons 5 2/2 treants. Some pros to this is that it's going to be a fantastic value. For just one card, you get 20/20 worth of stats over 2 uses, which is insane. It is also not even a legendary, so you can have 2 copies of it in your deck. So over 2 cards, you can get 40/40 worth of stats for this card. It is also 8 mana, which means that you can also pair it up with other 2 mana cost spells. So if you want to, on turn 10, you can still use it with Dendrologist, or you can use it with Power of the Wild to give all your treants +1/+1. Another pro to this one is that it is treant synergy. So we can go ahead now and potentially use it with Tree Speaker on the following turn if any of the treants stick for a pretty big board. We can also use it with things like Mulch Muncher if all of them die to make our Mulch Muncher even cheaper. Now some cons of this one is that it is a pretty bad tempo play. It doesn't impact the board immediately. So having such an expensive card like that not impacting the board, you pretty much have to be ahead on board to be able to play it. Otherwise, your opponent will just be able to overrun you and you can't do anything about it because you just wasted your whole last turn doing this. This card is also very expensive, so you can't really combo it with too many other cards in the same turn. So with this card, I think some potential uses for it, and in conclusion, I think it'll be very popular in Token Druid. So we still have Whispering Woods, and now we have this. So we have many ways to fill up our board, and our opponents only have so much removal to have to deal with all these wide boards that if any of our wide boards stick, we can Savage Roar them on the following turn. Also too, a lot of classes are losing their AoE removal spells. So Priest is losing Duskbreaker and Psychic Scream. We have Mage losing Dragon's Fury. So a lot of these classes are losing the removal to have to deal with these. So I think this card will see a lot of play in a token deck. So overall, because it is so strong at what it does, but it is very specific to those token and treant synergy decks, we will be seeing quite a bit of this. I will rate it 4 stars. And the last but not least card that we have for you today is a legendary dragon called Gallic Ghost. He is a 10 mana cost dragon for mage with a 4/12 stat line and also a battlecry effect. Your first spell that you cast this turn is free. Now some pros of this one is the obvious dragon synergy. We still have a lot of dragons that are going to be kept in standard, like Crowd Roaster and Dragon Moss Scorcher, Fire Tree Witch Doctor, so we will be seeing a Dragon Mage, I guarantee it. Mage is also losing a lot of their late game cards like Dragoncaller Alana and then Frostlich Jaina post-rotation, so I think this will help kind of fill some of that void for that late game that Mage is lacking. Even if nothing else, this card does have a pretty good stat line. It is a 4/12 creature, and it does impact the board immediately. Whenever you go ahead and lay these expensive creatures, especially if they don't have taunt, you want to be able to impact the board immediately, so that way you don't get overrun on the following turn. And this allows you to do just that. You can go ahead and cast a Flame Strike for free with it on the same turn. You can cast a Blizzard. I mean, there's so many potential uses for this card. Now, there aren't many cons to this card because it does so many things in one card, and it's a dragon. The only thing I have to say with this is be careful not to use the coin in the same turn that you play this, because the coin does count as your first spell that turn. So if you think you're going to be a little cheeky and then coin this out on turn 9, well, you're going to lose the battle cry effect. You still get the card that you generate from the discover, but you already wasted your free spell that turn. Overall, I think this is a fantastic card. I think it'll see a lot of play in more of like a control mage dragon deck. It does a lot of things on the one turn that you play it, and if it sticks around for a couple turns, then it is game changing by itself. Besides, can you imagine playing this on turn 10 and then being able to cast a Pyroblast for free with it? Overall, I think this is a fantastic card and we'll see a lot of play, does a lot of things, very versatile, and besides, it's a legendary dragon, so you can't not like it. I'm going to be rating it 5 stars. Well, that's all the card reviews I have for you today. Keep checking back because I will be doing plenty more card reviews in the future for this new expansion, Rise of Shadows. We only have 9 cards revealed to us so far out of 135. So we got a lot to go. Also too, leave a comment below. Tell me what you guys think of these new cards. You can also follow me on Twitch. I do a stream every single day, Monday through Friday. So you can follow me on there and also Twitter. Thank you everybody for joining me today. Until next time, stay funky.